Hi everyone. I haven't done it for a while. Revolut.
Please sit down, Nikolay. Oh, thank you very much, Andreas and Hannah. That was a really nice introduction. We're so happy to be here and so happy to have you here, Nick. Just a short introduction, yes. Andreas told you that I'm a journalist. I was raised as an engineer, so I come from the technology point of view. Been studying innovation as a journalist, but what always interested me was how technology changes the world, and you all know that. So we're in the digital age, and this is what really happens right now. And this is a very good example that we have here tonight, Revolut, changing the world. I'm so excited to have you here. We're proud to say that Stockholm is one of the fintech hubs in the world. So it's about time that you came here, actually. I think that's a good time. Before starting, I know that you are all Revolut users, so I was about to ask you if you're happy with your bank. Obviously you are. So I should ask you, do you have another bank except for Revolut? How many of you have another bank except for Revolut? Okay. Are you happy with that bank? How many? Okay, so. So, would you like to change bank completely? If there was a better alternative, how many? Well, just a few. I think you got a market here. So that's interesting. It's interesting how this... okay, are we here? No? Coming and going. Okay, right. How the financial sector has been really changing in the short time. Could you please, most people know you, of course, but for those who don't know you, could you give us a short introduction, who you are and why you started Revolut?
Sure. So my background was, I would say, less tech, right? I started my career as a trader in Lehman Brothers, so many years ago, ages ago. And then, so I always wanted to build a company. And then, as I was a trader, I was, traveling abroad, spending money, sending money also abroad because I was an expat living in London. And then, because I was a trader, I could, quickly calculate, how much I'm losing on every transaction, and it also, pissed me off. So I decided to sort it out for myself. So I ended up, opening, many bank accounts in HSBC, Citigroup. Didn't really work well because they still charge a lot of commissions. So I decided to build a business, a product that would allow myself and other people to avoid banking fees. So that's how it all started in 2015. So then we launched the product. I hired people, like for first 10 people, we actually built the product within I would say 12 months. It was very buggy, and it was very childish, I would say, compared to what it is now. Anyway, we raised funding, we pushed it off, right, and we started slowly, gaining user base. And then at later stages, I realized, problems are not only with transfers, or not only with card transactions abroad. There are problems in credit, problem in trading, problem in insurance, problem in mortgages, so problems everywhere where banks are. And then we started slowly solving other problems. So Hannah mentioned that we released commission-free trading. So that that's third or fourth problem that we solved. Now we're working on a much cheaper credit compared to banks. And then slowly we were building the set of products which would allow users to have 10 times better products and then 10 times cheaper compared to banks. So that's the goal of Revolut. In general, we want to build a truly global bank and make sure each person in every country can simply download the app and open a bank account within 1 minute. So that's the goal. Yeah.
That's a good answer. Better and cheaper and everywhere. That sounds like IKEA, kind of. Another kind of business, though. No, IKEA are passionate about, coming to every country and solve the problem of that country with their solution, kind of. Obviously, it became a large company, but there are a lot of smart people in fintech, lots of people who have been solving problems for some time, and a lot of really good technology people. So, I mean, that's not the whole answer to the question why you're a country that is valued at $1.7 billion, right? And over 7 million users and 1,200 coworkers, is that so? Yeah, 1,700. Right, they're growing very quickly. So what did you do different from the other fintech companies that try to solve this problem?
What did I do differently? I guess I was just more pushy, more aggressive, and more smart in how we approach problems, and then managed to scale much faster, right? So generally, in traditional startups, so the way they operate, they have large product teams. So the way we set up organization is more like we have many startups within our big startup. So these small startups, they use our brand, right? They use our client base, they use our financial resources, they use our compliance resources, our recruitment resources, but they build their own products with their own P&L, with their own metrics. So I guess that's allowed us to scale fast and then go in so many directions instead of focusing traditional one.
So kind of an ecosystem idea also, right?
Yes, ecosystem plus ability to hire the best as well.
So okay, and yet there are some similar companies like Monzo and N26 and companies like that, startups. But how are you different from them? What's your greatest opportunity compared to those companies?
Yeah, I don't like these names. So let's make sure just competitors go forward. Well, generally. So there are like quantitative metrics and non-quantitative, right? On the quantitative metrics in terms of revenue, user growth, activity per customer, right? We are number one, right? So that's I would say publicly available data. Non-quantitative metrics such as ability to ship, right? Brand name, knowledge of all people across the world about the brand. Again, I think we are number one, although we can't quantitatively prove it.
So right now, making a startup company is about learning all the time, I guess. So you must have some challenges and surprises during the first years of operation. Could you tell us a little bit what you learned? What's your biggest moments of learning and challenges that you learned from?
I think we learn every day, right? It's I can't really say that I learned everything. I think we're just scratching the surface. I remember when I started 4 years ago, 2015, there were so many things that I haven't known, right? And then I purely operated from, I would say, first principles or logic, right? And then when you apply logic just based on information that you know, right? You make suboptimal decisions, right? And then later you learn more, and then you realize that a lot of things you would do differently. One of them, how you hire people, right? Another thing is how you scale other functions of the company, right? Because the reality is product is just top of the iceberg, right? So to support top of the iceberg, you need to have a huge foundation, I would say, consisting of I don't know, your platform, your recruitment, your people, your culture, and to put it simple, right? So we're now in 6 products, right? So we have 6 product departments with their own P&L, with their own resources, and these 6 product departments are actually supported by 12 internal product departments. So we build actually many more products for ourselves compared to what we build for customers. For example, we take one department called finance, right? So within finance department there is at least 12 product teams focused on different products. One is FX market making, reconciliation, core banking system. My only point is that to build one small product, it actually requires a huge foundation that people don't see.
And to have that work well, of course, it's much about culture. As you said before, it's about yourself being aggressive, pushing, but you also got to have a team that can support that rhythm, that pace of change. And I know there's been some publicity, some news pieces about difficulties in the company, but what I would like to ask you is how, you obviously learned from that too, how do you build a human resource department in a really fast-growing startup company that is modern and sustainable? How do you do that?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, right, when you start as a founder, you focus 100% on product and on shipping products, right? And then what end up happening with this mentality, other supporting internal functions, for example, as people, we call it people department, not HR, they're just lacking resources. I mean, to give you an idea, So when we were, I think, 2015, we were 20, 30 people, and, not a single HR person, right? And then we grew up to 100, maybe 200 people, probably, one HR, right? So this era, was always lacking. Now we have like probably 80 people in HR, which is kind of more in line with the headcount. But generally, what tends to happen in startup world, when you scale fast, you focus on fires that you think add value now, right? You don't really focus on longer term things like I don't know, consistent HR. So when you're a more mature company, then you have more resources to spend on HR and other things.
I found that interesting that you say you prefer to call it the people department than an HR department. So that's kind of another focus than you usually have in an HR department. Could you develop on that?
I just don't like the word human resources, right? It's like a very impersonal, right? And then because we're a team, so we call it people, right? And then department is all about people. So within department, we have 2 product teams and then a lot of services teams. And then we make sure we track everything, starting from culture, obviously, to kind of what are behaviors in each team through different tools. We even track whether people enjoy working in the offices on a weekly basis, and then we assign these KPIs to again office managers to make sure our offices are top quality.
Now, about competition again, I personally think that although I mean all banks have been kind of sleeping and are discovering that they were about to be challenged, and suddenly they were. And they're waking up, and I must say that the Nordic banks are, in my eyes at least, quite kind of modern, trying to keep the pace, and they're implementing, at least my bank, a traditional bank, does have some app stuff which is similar to some fintech companies, what they've been offering, and kind of trying to stick around. Do you find the bank industry in Sweden or in the Nordics being different from other parts of the world in that sense?
Yeah, I think because you have a great ecosystem here in terms of startups and tech talent, plus it's more or less cashless society, right? I think digital is very developed in Nordics. So as a result, banks are also on average better compared to say US or Western Europe, especially Germany. So that's true. What you say, right? On the other side, they don't have global ambition, right? They don't have ambition to build product which covers many countries. As a result, like when you use just one local bank, right? When you travel, when you change country, you will not be able to have quick access to financial products in other countries. So that's a disadvantage. And generally, I believe fintechs are still better in developing UI UX compared to even Nordic banks.
So in that sense, because I was about to ask you if you find the competitiveness here in the Nordics being different when you enter this market than compared to, for example, Germany. But then in the end, maybe it's not such a big difference that the banks are a little bit more modern, or what do you say?
I would say in Nordics they're a bit more polished, right? But it doesn't mean that inside they are modern.
It's all about the surface, right? Show business, even the financial business. But what about the fintech sector in Stockholm or in Sweden then? There are some fairly big companies and some small startups being interesting. I'm personally impressed by a small new robot advising company called Fundler, which is, robot advising, something I know you've been talking about, but you haven't launched it. You might have it on the roadmap. How do you look upon the fintech industry in Sweden?
Well, I think you have great companies here. I personally admire Klarna, right? Even though they are already not startup, but I think they still achieved a lot. I know that you also have digital challenges. Overall, I think ecosystem here is very similar to UK and to Berlin. I think if we look across the world, where there are best ecosystems, obviously Silicon Valley, but they're not really fintech, right? And they're still lagging behind. And then, well, China, obviously with WeChat, I think extremely advanced. And then finally Europe. In Europe, there are only three places at the moment, which is London, Berlin, and then Stockholm.
And those fintechs that you see here, are they competitors, or are they possible partners, or are they just, building a nice ecosystem that makes you better?
I think we are all together compete against banks, so I wouldn't view them as competitors, but more like the friendly pack. Yeah.
So then, talking about banks, what's, if I ask you, the long-term destiny of traditional banks? What do you think?
Well, long-term destiny of traditional banks, I think very sad. Well, I think reality is so large retail banks such as JP Morgan, Citigroup, or HSBC, they will be able to compete because they have a huge balance sheet. So I think they will keep a bit of retail business. 80% of their business will be a corporate business. I think small and mid-sized banks they will disappear. I think in the world, like 5-10 years time, we'll see 2, 3, 4, 5 huge players who will take majority of retail market. We still will see big banks survive, but big banks with big balance sheet, because balance sheet is advantage. Small, medium, local banks, I just don't think they will have a chance.
And how long time?
How long time? I would say 10 years, right? 5, I think it's a bit short, right? Because these banking products are very sticky, right? In terms of generation, I think older generation is quite hard to switch, but like younger generation, it's quite easy.
It's like we always say, I don't know if Bill Gates and lots of other people said it, you overestimate what happens in 1 year and underestimate what happens in 10. So I'm not surprised you say that. So if the banks are not your competitors, who is?
Well, I would say banks are competitors, right? But so far, market is so huge, banks are so uncompetitive, right? So I don't really see competition. I think at later stage we'll see a lot of competition coming from big tech companies such as Amazon, probably, Apple, maybe, Google, definitely.
So let me ask the audience, who would trust Google with your money? Hands up. Who would trust Apple with your money? Hands up. A bit more for it. And who would trust Amazon? So just not very many. Okay. I see your point, because it's kind of a new, obviously, customer contact that you have in the tech industry, which is different. Talking about trust, I've been looking a little bit into this, and there are some people say there are two kinds of trust. The first one is that you trust the bank from actually keeping your money safe. And normally, traditional banks can live up to that. The second kind of trust is, will they give you good advice and take care of you, which is another kind of trust. And there it's not very obvious that traditional banks can live up to that. Could you comment on that? And specifically, how do you think that you build trust for your customers?
Yeah, you're exactly spot on, right? There are two things. One is advice, and one is trust to keep money. So trust to keep money is extremely hard to build, right? Especially for new company, and because people who keep money in banks, they keep it in banks because they want this money to be safe, right? And it's quite hard to give this money to tech company. So I think we need to do a lot of work on trust, branding, positioning, right? To actually match level of trust that traditional old school banks have. So that's our disadvantage. But advantage is fast, speed, obviously, ability to create better products, and then much better pricing compared to banks. I think with time we'll be able to match this level of trust as well.
So, I mean, building the brand, the second kind of trust, is something that I expect you to be better positioned to build than a traditional bank. Would you?
Well, it's reality is people trust institutions who were there for 100 years, right? So in our case, because we were there only for 4 years, it's quite hard to compete, right? So, but there are certain strategies, certain steps that we can take to bring the trust to 100-year-old institutional level.
So one interesting technology part, of course, is cryptocurrency in the financial world. My first question would be, how do you look upon cryptocurrencies? Is it something that could threaten the whole traditional way of doing finance business and replace it all actors? Or is it something that would be an additional kind of opportunity to do things that the traditional financial system cannot do today?
I don't think cryptocurrency will completely disrupt, because even if you have a cryptocurrency in the end, you will still need to cash it out in a normal bank account, which is controlled by banks, which are controlled by regulators, right? So unless there is a major shift in regulator mentality, right, about cryptocurrency, I just don't think system would change. So we'll see bits, here and there with cryptocurrency, but unless there is a huge mentality shift in policymakers and in regulators, I don't think we will see, big change.
And looking about these tech companies' initiatives like Facebook's Libra and Telegram's Gram and stuff like that, how do you look upon that? I know you already have some services with cryptocurrency within Revolut as well, but that's not your own cryptocurrency. But I mean, how do you look at those, for example, Libra and Gram?
Well, I like these new things, right? I'm also like an early adopter. I love, any kind of innovation happening in financial technology markets. But then reality is there is no kind of mass adoption, right? And mass adoption doesn't happen because there is a quite weak ecosystem, right? And plus regulators, they don't really like, what these companies do. So we'll see what happens. But for now, I just don't see that that is moving, fast.
I guess you could see a trust issue there as well. Facebook's been struggling with trust issues for other reasons, as we all know. Is that, you think, crucial for their capability of launching a new currency like Libra?
Yeah, of course. Dealing with money is not the same as just keeping your friends, right? So, yeah, you first need to have trust. You need to build a very strong brand, and then go from there.
And now, you recently, the last, most recent launch that you did, as we heard before, is stock trade, right? Without the fees that you normally have for stock trade. I've been looking a little bit at that as well, and what I'm curious about, if you think that a digital kind of evolution of stock trade could eventually kind of do the same thing as crowdfunding. Could make it possible to have a more kind of granular alternative to traditional IPOs, for example, having funding available 24/7 for small companies, modernizing the way we look upon fundraising, essentially. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we have the same idea, right? As whenever we look for funding again, we always think, okay, why do we need to go to VCs, right? What's the point, right? Why don't we have stock trading app within our app, right? Why don't we just put Revolut stock there and then see how people buy it, right? And avoid VCs, avoid investment banks who charge 3 to 5%. So idea is great, right? And we are looking at it. However, there are obviously obstacles in terms of regulation, how you set it all up. But I think overall it will be amazing, right? Imagine yourself, you go into stock trading app, there are startup companies there, and then your description, right, and some metrics attached to it, and then you can choose that amount that you want to invest, right, and then see it in the app. At the moment, no one is providing this kind of services. So we got in the UK someone like Cinders and Crowdcube, but they are rather small and not very advanced in terms of products. So no one yet, build an app where you can, just go inside and buy startup companies that you like. I would definitely use it.
I suppose you are using it. It's your own. So, so if we look 10 years ahead, what kind of, would stock exchanges as we know them today be very different, or what kind of evolution do you expect to see?
I think in essence it will be a bit different, right? So I think we have public markets for stocks and then private markets, and then a lot of VCs are actually benefiting from private markets, right? And then it's impossible for like normal person to invest in good startups, right? So I think in the future this breach there'll be a breach, and the gap will disappear. I think normal people will be able to invest in companies, I don't know, like iZettle, Uber, Adyen, pre-IPO, not after IPO.
Now, another obviously great part of digitalization today is artificial intelligence and automation. So I was thinking about mostly your own operations. I mean, artificial intelligence could obviously be used for anything like analyzing patterns of transactions, etc., but also for customer care with language technology, which is coming very strongly. How do you look upon automation and artificial intelligence within Revolut's own operations in the next future, and how would that affect your organization?
I mean, in a huge way. In short, like we use this aspect in almost every part of the business, right? Starting from onboarding, finishing offers that we give to our customers, right? So we have this beta product called Perks, right? We release it only to 1% customers in UK, and then the way it works. So we obviously see your transactional patterns, right? We know that, for example, you like Starbucks or you like Paul, right? And then what we do, based on your allocation and based on your transactional patterns, we send you offers from merchants who want to compete with Starbucks and who want to compete with Paul, right? For example, who's competitor of Starbucks? Say Costa, right? And then if we see that you spend in Starbucks every day at 9 a.m., say on your way to work, right? And then Costa actually sends you a personalized offer. Okay, if you switch to Costa, right, 50% discount on your morning coffee, right? So this is one thing. Another thing that we released already, and it had great success again with Perks, is so whenever you book a flight ticket, right, then we see that you booked a flight ticket, and then we immediately send you a push. Hey, Booking.com gives you a 10% discount on your. Then you go to Booking.com instead of going to Expedia. So it's good for company, good for people as well, right? Because they save money. So that's one product. Another product is internal products. We obviously have all this transactional monitoring, right? This is completely based on anti-fraud. That is completely based on machine learning. Third part is customer support. So to give you an idea, mid-sized bank. So mid-sized bank generally has 5 million customers, right? And they run 10,000 people customer support team. So we have 7 million customers, and then we run 450 people customer support team because a lot of things are being handled by Rita. So Rita is a Revolut intelligent travel assistant. Again, chatbot. And then the chatbot is answering 40% of questions that people ask. I can continue across departments, but that's the future. So machine learning, these algos, they give you ability to automate a lot of things and actually enhance user experience as well.
So 2 follow-up questions to this. And in the overall pictures, obviously, when you don't have fees for currency exchange and for stock trade, and you have a product which is a low-cost product, you got to have a revenue stream anyway. So I imagine that lowering the cost with this kind of automation, artificial intelligence, is one way of lowering the costs, essentially, of course. But also, these services that you mentioned could give you an alternative revenue stream from partners, business partners. Is that so?
Yeah, exactly. So partnerships as well, like this marketplace model also works for certain products. Obviously, it doesn't work for stock trading, right? Because why would you choose 2 stockbrokers or 3 stockbrokers? It might work for credit. It definitely work for insurance as well, right? So that's what we're experimenting at the moment. So I think right combination of doing things in house, plus having one partner, plus having marketplace is a winning combination. You can never say that you either build everything in house or you do everything from marketplace. There's always kind of a balance, and then the level of the balance is determined simply by logic, by what customer needs and how we provide a better and better service, cheaper service and better experience.
The second one related to automation is the effect on the organization. Now, traditional organizations, incumbent organizations, normally kind of scared of implementing too much automation because it threatens the job opportunity. Of course, people are afraid of losing their jobs. But so I guess that's different in a new organization which is growing, because I mean, how is the culture? How do people internally, your coworkers, react to automation? Is that a threat or an help or an opportunity?
Well, in Revolut, everyone realizes there's a future, right? And there is no point to fight the future. It's always a losing battle. And then teams, they actually, understand it, right? And then they build automation themselves, right? And even for customer support, right? When people have a lot of repetitive things, because through automation, through models, right? We propose customer support agent to send the right answer as well. So we give them some tips what to answer, right? So they also appreciate that they can help customer much quicker. So I think inside the company we're all on board that automation is the way forward. Obviously, in other banks there might be a certain population of employees who might be afraid of losing job because of automation.
Although I must say that Swedish bank SCB was one of the first to use the conversation agent called Emilia, if you know that from IPsoft, which is a very advanced chat bot agent. And I heard actually internally that they were really happy with implementing that kind of technology because, as exactly as you say, you can go away from doing those repetitive tasks that are really boring. So looking a little bit ahead, you're expanding now in a few markets. What you didn't mention next was the Chinese market that I'm really curious about. What do you think about your opportunities or ability to go into the Chinese market with Tencent and Alibaba and those really strong competitors?
I think we have advantage, right? So obviously not for local China, but so Chinese are number one travelers now in the world. So if you go to Harrods, I don't know, on the weekend, you understand what I'm saying, right? And then I think we have advantage, right? Because we provide effectively cross-border currency services, right? Which will be extremely beneficial for Chinese tourists. It's number one. Number two, there is another project that we're working on at the moment, which is called Digital VAT Refund, right? So it's actually amazing product. So imagine you're a Chinese tourist, you go into London, you spend in Harrods, I don't know, £1,500 buying yourself some fancy bag, right? And then we automatically refund 20%, right? Because we can see that, okay, you came from China, right? We can see VAT, 20% on transaction, right? And then we can digitally claim it with HMRC, which is a British tax agency, right? And then we refund. So this experience is kind of unbeaten, right? By Chinese rivals. I think they're a bit behind. Yes, they're very strong, locally, but more like international experiences, they're not there yet.
So when do you think you could enter the Chinese market?
It's a very provocative question. So I remember 2 years ago I was saying we will enter US market within 6 months, right? So we're still not there. 2 years. So China can be even more challenging than US. Sometime, my answer. Yeah.
So would it be the last large market to enter in that sense? That it's the most challenging market, maybe.
But opportunity is also huge, right? Yes, costs to launch are high, but opportunity is huge. So I don't think it will be a last in prioritization. So China maybe third wave, how we call it. So we're launching waves.
Coming back to the trust aspect, trust is very different in different parts of the world. It's in the US and the Western world, it's very much about it's professional trust. I trust you because I know you do good things. Whereas in Asia, in the Arab world, it's more like I've got to feel that you're a trustable person. I got some personal relationship to you in business. I mean, it's more important than the contract. Actually, sometimes some people say that if the first thing that you do is pulling up a contract, an agreement, and you want to sign it, they say, well, don't you trust me? That's kind of an offense, that you need an agreement to build trust. So it's very difficult to trust in different cultures, and you probably know that from your background as well, in Russia. So how does that affect your operations when you try to build trust in a new market? Do you think about this cultural aspect?
Yeah, we definitely see market from market, there are different levels of trust, right? It's simply like in some markets, people are not afraid to use new products. In some markets, people just don't trust new entrants. They don't use it, and it greatly varies, country by country, culture by culture. But I guess it's a given for us, right? So we operate with what we have.
Just one thing going back to yourself. You were trained as a physicist, and you were a swimmer, competing as well. Did that help you think, building a company? Anything of those two things?
Yeah, definitely, right? So, well, studying physics, so studying theoretical physics is definitely like teaches you structured thinking, right, and ability to actually dig down, understand where reality is, right, and how different parts of reality, are connected with each other. It's extremely important. And being, well, competitive swimmer, then generally, like competing in sports, well, teaches you how to win effectively, how to be number one, how to be aggressive, how to reach your goals. So I think this is a very important for entrepreneurs, to have this kind of combination. So having structured thinking plus some kind of competitiveness and aggressiveness.
Sounds kind of the ultimate combination. Maybe that's the clue to Revolut's success. So the last question, of course, would be, where will Revolut be in 5 years from now?
Well, truly global bank, right? My answer. That's our mission. That's our goal, to become a truly global bank. So no one has done it before, but we were here to try.
So that was all from me. I think we got some other questions, but thank you very much for that. First, do we have some? Yeah, here we go. Oh, I will try to read your nice questions here. Right. Yeah, we can start with this, because I forgot to talk about your banking license. You actually acquired a banking license in Lithuania that you still haven't started using, if I'm right. So what are your plans for the banking license?
So basically, the strategy for the group is that we operationalize a banking license in Lithuania. We roll it out across Eastern Europe, Central Europe, for Western Europe, and so we applying for Irish banking license. And then for UK, provided there is hard Brexit, we're also applying for British banking license. So that's for business in Europe. Apart from it, we're applying for banking license in Australia now, and then for US. So generally, where we enter every country, we're getting a banking license.
And that's, of course, connected also to your ability to give credit. So someone here is asking, will you be introducing credit cards?
Yeah, so that's another team, well, I would say now department, right, that works on credit, and part of the department works on credit cards, which we're going to introduce in December.
Right, this one, will you implement, the Swedish bank ID, that one, of course, owned by the major banks, and the Swish mobile payment system, also owned by the banks. Will you implement some of those, or any connections with those?
Yeah, so part of our product localization program, so we will be doing it, right? It will either be done centrally in London, or we are going to hire a product team here on the ground to actually localize product for market needs. We haven't decided yet.
Now, this is kind of interesting startup question. We've been touching some of these arguments before, topics before, but how do you manage to build new features so fast? I mean, grow so fast and develop so fast and still keep the quality high? Well,
as I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, right? So we well, build this model when we have, startup, and then, start building, startups within startup. I think the key is to hire strong founders, right, to run these startups. We call them product owners. So that's a key difference.
Do you use AI when you pick people?
I tried to be honest here, not AI, but like some simple model, right? And then initially it was like just set of questions, and then I run these questions across our whole organization because I knew who is top performer, who is not, right? I could measure, I could find some statistical evidence. So some things are there, right? So you can really use it, but reality, it's scientifically, it's not cannot be used right yet. But I think within 2, 3, 4, 5 years time, there will be companies who provide these services, because there is definitely like huge untapped opportunity in actually evaluating people and matching people to the right jobs. I think is so important.
Using simple statistics, that's interesting that you mentioned, especially as you're a physicist. If you haven't read Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman, please do that. It's an amazing book. One of the takeaways is that normally a simple algorithm is better than human judgment in very many situations because it's consistent every time. Here's one question. What actions has increased Revolut's usage or customer base the most? And this person think it was the introduction of Apple Pay. Could you comment on that?
In some markets, definitely, right, especially in small markets like Bulgaria, Romania, Eastern Europe. So I think we were the first to introduce Apple Pay there. It definitely helped increase usage. In other markets, when we introduced cryptocurrency, we acquired a lot of people back in the days when cryptocurrency was popular. In some countries, it was trading as well, but it really depends on the country.
So let's finish with this one, which is similar, but you could answer it kind of again. How do you plan to outpace competitors who so far appear to provide similar services?
Well, if we start comparing, likes for likes, so you will see that Revolut, providing more services, and then we will continue doing it the same way, right? So continue, to deliver new products super fast and of high quality. And that's, I guess, the only way to beat competition, right? To outperform them on product quality.
So it's been a great pleasure to have you here. Really interesting talking to you. Really interesting to hear your answers and tell you about how it is to build this fast-growing company. Will you please give Nikolay a great applause? And I would say thank you, and I'll hand over the mic to Hannah.
Thank you so much.